and welcome to a very special Scots Wi Hae podcast in collaboration with the Edinburgh International Book Festival and Publishing Scotland. My name is Alistair Braidwood, and I had the pleasure of talking to 8 representatives from a variety of publishers for the Scottish Publishers Showcase. In a moment, you'll find out just who and all about what they do. But first of all, I spoke to the director of the Edinburgh Book Festival, Nick Barley. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Scots Wi Hae podcast. And this time round, we're going to be talking about Edinburgh International Book Festival's Scottish Publishers Showcase. And I'm delighted to be joined by the director of the Book Festival, Nick Barley. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Alistair. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Let's start with a question about the showcase itself. Why did you decide to put it on?
Well, the first thing was that the book festival over the last couple of years has been smaller than it's been in previous years. And because of that, we haven't been able to support the work of Scottish publishers in the way that we would normally like to. And whilst we know that publishing as a whole has had a reasonably okay time of it during the lockdown, more people have been reading books and so on, we're aware that some publishers have struggled. And so we wanted to do everything we could as a festival to shine a light on the great work that's going on across the Scottish publishing scene, from the biggest players who get international attention, right through to the smaller players like Cranach and publishing books out of Lewis, just to make sure that everyone's aware of the incredible wealth of activity going on in this country.
It's part of a wider programme called the Business of Books. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the Business of Books came about a few years ago from our realization that the book festival, whilst it's mainly an organization, an event which is for authors to speak to the public, we realized that more and more people were coming to the book festival who are working in publishing, editors, agents, publishers, and authors themselves, and who would have these incredible conversations behind the scenes, off stage, backstage. Book deals were being done, ideas were being thrown around, incredible serendipitous encounters between an agent and an author. We realized just what a role we play as a hub of activity in Scotland for publishing. So we thought we'd try out bringing people together in a slightly more formal way, not like a book fair, not with 15-minute meetings of agents and publishers or whatever, but just a slightly more formal approach. And over the years, we've built this idea of the Business of Books, where people come along and they can have conversations about all sorts of aspects of what it is to be a publisher, learn their trade, improve their work, increase their networking, and basically be as good as they can be at their jobs. And it's proved to be incredibly successful with publishers.
It's really interesting as well. I think that often the part that writers don't know is how to get their books into the hands of publishers. It's something that I'm often asked, and I think by having this at a festival rather than a book fair, as you say, is a way that people who might be there anyway attending to see other writers can suddenly get answers to those questions. Absolutely
right, yeah. I mean, one of the amazing things that happened a few years ago was when the Scottish crime writer Willie McIlvanney wrote to me. I think it was 2011. It was in my second year as director of the book festival. And he said, "Nick, you may not know this, but all of my books are out of print and I'm going to die soon." It was in this spindly handwriting, beautiful. And he said, "Please would you do me the honor of having one last crack at the whip and give me a place in your main theatre?" And I did. And again, I was thrilled that the event sold out. Yeah. But in the audience was the publisher from Canongate. And he didn't realize that Willie McIlvanney's books were out of print. And he came out of that event and he dashed over to the Authors' Year where he saw William McIlvanney's agent and he said, "I've got to get Willie McIlvanney's books back into print right now. Can we do it?" And as a result of that event and that conversation, the following year, Willie McIlvanney's backlist was brought back into print. And sadly, Willie died a few years later, but he died knowing that his legacy was intact. And that's an example of the kind of things that happen at book festivals. Yeah. Unexpected, you can't plan them. So this Business of Books project is a way of just helping just kind of create the conditions where those conversations can happen a bit more easily. And as you say, authors can get books into the hands of publishers. They know publishers will be around and are interested and are listening. And it's a wonderful experience for everyone. That a place where those conversations that people maybe don't even realize need to be had
they can discover that that's the place to have them.
Yeah, and let's be honest, heaven forbid that we should admit this, authors like a drink, publishers like a drink, and quite often these conversations take place late at night over a glass of beer or a glass of wine. And it's really important. That's how business gets done in publishing. So here we are at the festival, welcoming anybody who'd like to be a writer, anybody who's already a writer but hasn't quite got the right book deal, but also somebody who wants to be an editor, a publisher. This is a place for learning the trade as well.
And the showcase, I believe, is in conjunction with Publishing Scotland. How important is the work that they do?
It's absolutely vital. And Publishing Scotland for many years has been a really crucial organisation representing the work of Scotland's publishers. You know, it has to be said that many of Scotland's publishers are very small operations. They're passion projects published by maybe one or two people, often in a very, very ad hoc way. And in order to get books available to people beyond Hadrian's Wall, not only in the UK, but internationally, requires the kind of resources that many publishers simply don't have. And Publishing Scotland's work in promoting books and publishing internationally, taking publishers to the Frankfurt Book Fair, the London Book Fair, for example, arranging for the sales of rights so that books can get translated into other languages and sold. This is part of the publishing world, which is really difficult to make happen when you're a small publisher. And it's thanks to Publishing Scotland that we've got such a vibrant publishing community today.
What strikes me looking at the publishers involved is the range and breadth and variety, not only of what they're covering, but of where they are in the country. I mean, it's quite astonishing that every single part seems to be represented. Has that changed a lot since you were director of the book festival?
Yeah, it has actually. It's a really good point. Until you mentioned it, I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. I mean, I'd mentioned Cranachan being based in Lewis, and we're so thrilled that they're making a go of it from Lewis, but also Sandstone Press, who are based in Inverness. They've really had a good time of things over recent years. One of their authors was the winner of the International Booker Prize for books in translation. And that's been a huge boost for Scottish publishing to get a book translated from Arabic into English by a publisher based in Inverness. It's a really, really wonderful demonstration of how Scottish publishing is international in its ambition. And it can do that not necessarily just from a central belt, but it can happen wherever people need to be in Scotland.
Well, Nick, thanks so much for taking time to have a chat with me today. I can't wait to talk to the publishers, but it's been a delight to chat to yourself. Many thanks.
Thanks very much, and thanks for all you're doing.
I'm joined now by Channie Mcbain, the commercial director from Flores Books. Hello, Channie.
Hello, Alistair. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So first of all, what can you tell us about Flores Books?
Well, Flores Books is an independent Scottish publisher. We are based here in Edinburgh. We are former Scottish Publisher of the Year. We're the home of some award-winning fiction and authors, and we have a growing international reach, particularly in North America, where we're working with a distributor called Consortium.
Oh, that's interesting. So first of all, how long have you been going, and what is the history of Flores?
Flores is now in its 45th year, and it started as two people at a kitchen table, and they were publishing religious books. We are now a thriving staff of 16, and I think the biggest turning point in Flores's history is when we took over the Kelpies list of classic children's fiction from Scotland. So we took over that from fellow Scottish publisher Canongate back in 2002. That included books by Molly Hunter and Kathleen Fiddler, really classic. And since then, we've just been working on our Scottish list and growing the Kelpies, and that's probably what we're best known for in Scotland.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the Kelpies? That's really interesting. When that was taken over, was it a kind of regular seller? You knew that this was going to be something that would sell?
Yeah, so Canongate had been publishing Kelpies for quite some years, and they were all brilliant classic books. And when we took them over, we decided to add new voices into that, contemporary voices. And we started off with the middle grade, which is what the Kelpies originally were. And since then, we have introduced picture books, picture Kelpies, board books, wee Kelpies, illustrated chapter books, which are young Kelpies. And we've just got a whole range now for all Scottish children and Scottish children's books, everything you could want.
That's fascinating. It's an area I think that people often don't think to discuss.
Children's is a massive part of what we do. So as well as Kelpies, which is our Scottish children's books, we also do international children's picture books. So we are the home of some European heritage brands. So we publish Elsa Beskow, who is known as sort of the Beatrix Potter of Sweden, and another fabulous illustrator called Sibylla von Olfers, who was a German illustrator working in the Art Nouveau period. And they are both brands that we are reinvigorating we have been the last couple of years, and reintroducing them to the market. They've always had really passionate fans, and now we're getting to introduce them to new readers. It's very exciting. So we've got those books, and we are also doing lots of contemporary international children's books, picture books. We do those, publish them both in translation, and we also originate books. And most of those are selling in North America. That's our biggest market. We have recently done a picture book called The Night Walk by Marie Dorlens, which is getting stellar reviews in America. It's very exciting.
And you mentioned that you've moved into the North American market. Can you tell us a bit about how you did that?
Absolutely. So we started working with a new distributor who are called Consortium back in 2019. And they are fabulous. They have excellent reach into lots of bookstores. They have a great rep force who work with indies all over the country. We also have a great PR and marketing team that we're working with, Myrick Marketing, and it's just so opened up so many doors in terms of the kind of books that we can publish, and that people are really enjoying. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been incredibly rewarding.
It's such an interesting thing to think about publishers breaking America in the same way that bands go and break America, and then you can actually get your books out there. What challenges do you face in publishing today? Because I guess things are constantly changing.
Absolutely. I mean, cannot ignore the impact that the pandemic has had. That's being felt continually, and that's really been impacting all parts of the publishing ecosystem. But thankfully, particularly with our authors, our bookseller friends, our festival friends, all of these people who've been incredibly creative in reaching out to readers over the past wee while, coming back with force. This is very exciting. But I would say probably the biggest challenge that Flores has, and that publishing as an industry has, is ensuring that our books, our creatives and our staff are as inclusive and as diverse as we can be. And that for us, that we're really reflective of modern Scotland. That's something that you will see discussed a lot in the children's publishing industry. We all know there's so much more we need to do in order for all children to see themselves in our books. That diverse creatives their voices are being heard, and that the publishing industry itself needs to become more inclusive. That's something that we are keenly aware we have a long way to go on, but it's something that we're putting at the heart of what we are doing. We're actively seeking talented creatives from diverse backgrounds, and we're really trying to ensure that all of our originated books are as inclusive as possible.
So can you talk about maybe some of those books, maybe give us an example of 3 current or future titles that you're excited about?
Absolutely. So it's really hard to choose 3. So what I did was I chose one that's just come out, one that's almost coming out, and then one that you have a little bit of time to wait for. So the one that has just come out is Velda, the Osmus Viking and the Voyage of Deadly Doom, which is a hilarious illustrated chapter book by David McPhail and Richard Morgan. Velda, the character, she was first introduced in the Thorfinn the Nicest Viking series. She is a small Viking warrior with a big attitude, and her attitude could just not be contained in one series. She needed her own series. So this is the first book. The next one's out next year. It's fiercely funny, brilliantly adventurous, and a little bit rude, which I think is why my 6-year-old really loves it. But we've been reading that one at bedtime. Then one that's coming quite soon, so October, is the amazing illustrated Atlas of Scotland. So this is coming on the back of an amazing animal atlas of Scotland, which we published last year, which has been incredibly successful. So in October, you're getting an atlas of the whole of Scotland. It covers fabulous facts about people and places and geography, history. It's also written by David McPhail, actually, and the illustrations are by Anders Frang. He is an incredibly talented illustrator. My favorite part of the forthcoming book is the illustrations of cows and horses, which sounds really odd, but if you've never seen a cow looking haughty, then you are going to in this book. They are just so brilliant. Yeah.
Excellent.
Have to be seen to be believed. So that's 2. My 3rd exciting one, you have to wait till February, but it'll be so worth it. The Sky Beneath the Stone, which is an astonishing middle grade from a debut author called Alex Malarkey. It is about Ivy North, who is a 13-year-old adventurer who's afraid to go outside. But she has to go into this enchanted kingdom called Underfell to rescue her brother. And Underfell is like the Lake District, but much more dangerous. It's a book that we just couldn't wait to publish. Alex her writing is captivating, her world building is immersive, and just wait till you see the cover reveal. It's totally out of this world.
That sounds amazing, I have to say, and all 3 sound amazing. And I do love the fact that you've got your own focus group at home to go through children's books. That's terrific. Well, Channie, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, not at all. I'm thrilled to chat to you and to be talking a little bit about Flores.
I'm joined now by Nicola Ramsey from Edinburgh University Press. Hello, Nicola.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. First of all, can you tell us a bit about Edinburgh University Press?
Sure. Okay, so we are an academic publisher of both books and journals. We're a team of 40 people now, and we're publishing around 250 books and 50 journals each year for the academic market. So most of our sales are to university libraries, but we do also reach an individual readership through our textbooks for students and a small number of crossover academic trade titles. We're the 3rd largest university press in the UK, and we're the only university press in Scotland.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. So how long have you been going? What's the history of the EUP?
Right. Well, we believe 72 this year. The start date is a little fuzzy, but the generally held view is that we were founded in 1949 by a guy called Archie Turnbull as a department of the University of Edinburgh. And we published then a real kind of eclectic mix of academic books that kind of represented the full gamut of subjects covered by the University of Edinburgh. So we could very genuinely say at that stage that we published on everything from astronomy to zoology. We have in the past had a trade imprint, Polygon, which began as a student-led venture and was founded by, amongst others, a young Gordon Brown. And I believe Ian Rankin had something to do with Polygon at some point. But balancing the competing demands of trade and academic publishing did become increasingly tricky. So a decision was taken to focus on the academic publishing side, which by that point was including a growing list of journals as well as books. And the relationship that we have with the University of Edinburgh has kind of changed over that time as well. So we're no longer a department of the university, although they do remain our sole shareholder, but we sort of function as a limited company. And that allows us to very much set our own editorial direction, although we still rely very strongly on our press committee, which is made up of academics from the university, and we require their approval for everything that we publish. So those connections are still strong and important.
I was going to ask you what areas you cover, but as you say, it literally is from A to Z, depending on what the academics are working on. How do you choose then who you're going to publish? Is it the group that get together? Is that how it happens?
Sure. No. So that was the range, but we've actually focused in quite. Not narrowly, but we publish in far fewer subject areas now. Right. So there are 9 core subject areas within the humanities and social sciences. Classics and ancient history, film studies, Islamic and Middle Eastern studies, and so on. And so we have a team of commissioning editors, and each commissioning editor works on 1 or in some cases 2 of those lists. So they're responsible for kind of establishing what's happening in the market within those subject areas, finding out who the key authors are that we're wanting to publish, the important areas that we ought to be covering, and they go out and they're commissioning books from academics from a global base, actually. So we do publish academics from the University of Edinburgh, but the author base is much wider than that. And
what challenges do you specifically face in publishing today? I'm imagining they might be different to other publishers.
Yeah, I would say our number 1 challenge, and this is unique to academic publishing, is open access. Which is based on the principle that research that is publicly funded should not then be put behind a paywall, which I think is a principle that we can all get behind. And that started with journal publishing in the sciences, where there is a lot of research funding, and some of that funding is therefore able to be channeled into supporting the publishing costs that allows that work to then be made available open access. However, that has now become a really live issue within the humanities across books and journals. And this is an area where there's much less funding. So there's a real challenge in terms of deciding how best to cover the publishing costs if it's not by selling the content. Right. And there are loads of interesting experiments and initiatives underway. You know, everyone's trying to find a sustainable and a scalable answer to the problem, but we're not there yet. So that, I think if you asked any academic publisher, they would say that would be the number 1 challenge facing us.
Because I'm guessing that, you know, where other publishers might think a successful book is one that sells well, then, you know, you get different parameters for what you consider as
exactly. It's around access and downloads, and it's really important. It all makes so much sense particularly because we operate in a very digital environment now. So we still print our books and we sell print copies, but our digital sales are increasing all the time, and that's where we're able to really kind of emphasize the focus on accessibility and discoverability and all of those things, and open access really helps with that. But then, yes, what is success if it's not how many print copies of a book you've sold? So there's all sorts of things to do with downloads and reach, and there are purely open access publishers out there who are really good on reporting on all those things and can clearly demonstrate that they're reaching a much wider readership with this approach.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear that, just how different the different publishers are kind of working. Can you tell us about 3 current or future titles that you are excited about? It's difficult to narrow it down to 3. I do realise that.
I know, right? It's like choosing your favourite children, isn't it? But I have chosen 3, and as I was mentioning earlier, we do publish some academic trade books. So those are books that we're hoping can reach a wider readership, and they're written with that readership in mind. And so the first of those is called Living with Shakespeare by Geoffrey Marsh. It was published in spring this year in a fabulous big glossy format packed with loads of amazing colour pictures. And it tells the story of St Helens Parish in London, which is where Shakespeare lived in the 1590s. So this was the time when he was writing Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Merchant of Venice. And it takes the parish records to really kind of dig into the lives, not only of Shakespeare, but also his neighbours. So you get stories of the bewitched girl who vomited pins, and her father, the vicar, who killed 2 people in a football match several years earlier. So we get a real insight into the world in which Shakespeare lived, which interestingly was a world then as now that was battling a pandemic. So then it was the bubonic plague. So I just kind of think it's sort of a nice, interesting, neat way to see how things come around. The next book is The Eurasian Steppe by Warwick Ball. This is coming out in a couple of months. It's already been named a Summer Book of 2021 by Diana Dark in the TLS. It's another wonderfully illustrated book, and it takes the reader on a journey through 5,000 years of history of the Eurasian Steppe, which, for those who don't know, is the ecoregion that stretches 7,000 kilometres from Hungary to eastern Siberia. And it shows how through its history, languages, art, ideas, peoples, nations, identities, it's shaped almost every aspect of life in Europe. And I love it because the history is fascinating in itself, but it's also that idea that as far as Europe is concerned, borders don't really count for very much in the face of the flow of people and their ideas, and that's what we all benefit from. So I think it has good resonances for today. And last, I wanted to highlight a really important book that we're publishing this autumn, which is David Alston's Slaves and Highlanders. And this explores the prominent role of Highland Scots in the slavery industry of cotton, sugar, and coffee plantations in the 18th and 19th centuries. And there's a focus on what the author calls the silenced histories. So this is the voices of those who were enslaved by Scottish Highlanders in the Caribbean islands and Guyana. And it's no doubt a difficult and deeply uncomfortable part of our history, but one that we think it's important that we face. And David Alston does a really great job of doing that with great insight. So yeah, those are 3 of our books that I wanted to tell you about.
They all sound fascinating reads, I have to say. Well, thank you, Nicola, for taking time to have a chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm now joined by Emily Dewhurst from Kitchen Press. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Alistair.
So first question is, what can you tell us about Kitchen Press?
Well, Kitchen Press is a small independent publishing company, and we specialise in food and drink titles. We mostly do restaurant cookbooks, but we've been diversifying quite a bit recently. We're very small, we do 2 or 3 books a year. And so we work really closely because we do really large format picture books. There's a lot of production, and we work very, very closely with the restaurants stroke authors that we're working with at the time. That's
really interesting. Maybe delve into that a bit deeper in a minute. But well, how long have you been going? What is the kind of history of Kitchen?
So this is the 10th year, actually. I think this might be we launched our first book, the Parlour Cafe Cookbook, in November 2011. And the Parlour Cafe is a tiny but much loved institution in Dundee, which isn't necessary. It's changed a bit now, but Dundee is not best known for its food offer. And the parlour was kind of this little beacon, this wonderful chef, Gillian Veal, who just made what she felt like cooking, and the menu changed all the time. And it was kind of a meeting point for all the art school and the university, just a really lovely cafe. And I think I started thinking, if this cafe was in Bloomsbury, she would have a book deal now, because some editor would have walked past and gone, oh my God, this wonderful place. And it set me thinking really about how many of these wonderful local cafes there are that have really strong connection to their sort of locals and to their punters, and that are sort of quite unsung. So anyway, we did a cookbook, and it did really, really well. And it was illustrated. I think for quite a long time I was worried about sort of dipping our toes into food photography, because it's really easy to get wrong, and especially on a small budget. I mean, all these, you know, these huge Phaidon books, absolutely stunning, so expensive to produce. So also really it was in keeping with the kind of vibe of the cafe, and there's a great illustration course at Duncan of Jordanston. So we're really lucky in Dundee, we have a lot of great illustrators. So we did it as an illustrated title, and it just did really well, and it seemed to kind of hit a chord, and it really seemed to be a path that we could get quite a lot out of. You know, there's lots of increasingly really interesting places to eat in Scotland, and we don't only work with Scottish places, we've done titles down south as well. And so yeah, that's how it started.
So it was a case that you kind of saw a gap in the market, but it started as a local gap in the market. It was just started that one idea.
Absolutely. And I didn't particularly even know, if I'm honest, whether I would do any more. It was really just a project. I was off on maternity leave. It was just one of those ideas that nags at you a little bit. I really love cookbooks, so I thought, well, let's make a cookbook. And then, yeah, it was a really enjoyable experience, and it all went well. So that's kind of when I shifted from my day job, really.
So the practicalities of working with a restaurant, how does that come about? Do you approach them and say, we think this is good, or do they have that idea as well? Does it?
I mean, it varies project to project. Sometimes we're approached, sometimes we approach them, and it's important. Really, it's very, very collaborative, the way that we work. So obviously one of the biggest problems for restaurants, if they want to do a book, is time, obviously. I mean, especially kind of the really interesting places tend to be chef run. So they're not only running the restaurant, but they're also cooking all the food. And, you know, especially if they're open day and nights, like our first books actually were mostly cafes. And I think that's purely because, you know, then at least the chefs have evenings off, which they can spend writing a book. You know, it is a very, very labor heavy thing to do, running a restaurant or cafe. So we really help with editorial, and we really work however an author wants to do it. So sometimes people will just send over, you know, I don't know, 10 recipes a week, and just keep on sending stuff over until we've got enough for a book, and then we put it all together. Sometimes we get a complete manuscript sent over. And that's really why we don't actually do that many books, because we're really conscious that, you know, we have a restaurant's reputation in our hands, really, and we really work with them on the project to make sure that it is exactly what they want it to be.
I think it's really interesting. To me, it kind of reflects Scotland's food scene in general, because you do have these lovely individual quirky restaurants or cafes, and sometimes the problem is that they try to expand, and when the expansions take something away from it. So I think that's interesting. It seems that you're following that model as well. It's got to be something that you're passionate about and think we can work with these people, rather than just saying, how many cookbooks can we, you know, fire out over a period?
Absolutely. I mean, really, a cookbook is only going to, the ones that work best are always with a place that that people get a real buzz from going to, and they feel like it's their kind of secret restaurant, you know, and they want to share it with people. So we did a book last year with the Seafood Shack up in Ullapool. And I think, you know, it's beloved by locals, but it's associated with so many people for getting out of their normal life, and this kind of fantasy fishing village on the West Coast. And, you know, they want to share it with people. I think that's really the secret of its success, actually.
So what other challenges do you face in publishing today, particularly, I suppose, with the last year, with restaurants being hit?
Yeah, I mean, the last year was very interesting for us. And I think if we were a bigger company that did kind of 12 books a year or whatever, it might have been different. But actually, at the start of last year, I actually thought we were snookered, because, I mean, all the restaurants have obviously had such an awful time that having to come back and to have the time and money to invest in a cookbook is, you know, it's a big ask. But actually, I think a lot of people spent that time working out where they were as a business and really prioritizing on where they wanted to go. And so actually we came, and from a readership point of view, certainly the seafood chat couldn't have come at a better time, because I think it really provided escapism to all these people, you know, stuck at home in cities all over the UK, could look at this book, and it just represented a kind of freedom and a simpler life, or, you know, yeah, I think it really helped its appeal, actually. For us, lockdown itself didn't hurt at all in terms of our kind of core business. The bit actually that has had knock-on effect has been, we do all our printing in India. We've got a really great printer in India who do lovely books, and they do a really great job. But shipping has been hugely affected by the pandemic, and also by Brexit in a weird kind of knock-on way. So that's probably the thing that has, you know, the prices have gone up a lot. Yeah. And just the timescales have changed and are more erratic, really.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about 3 current or future titles that you're excited about?
Of course. Well, I'm in London just now for the launch of our most recent title, Eat, Bike, Cook, which is a really small, really great little book. It's based on the illustrations by a woman called Kitty Pemberton Platt, who does illustrated food diaries of female cyclists over a whole range of different distances and events. So it can range from just an absolute hobbyist cyclist who likes going out for a 4-hour ride on a Saturday, to Tiffany Cromwell, who's an Australian Olympian who, you know, so they're all looking at what they eat before, during, and after their bike rides. And it's the whole point actually is it's not like, you know, eat this and you're going to become faster. It's like what people really use to fuel, like how they enjoy themselves, the sort of female community around cycling. And, you know, that extends to the beer afterwards and the Haribo that you eat mid-ride to get you up a hill. And so we've got 19, I think, of those food diaries, and then lots of complimentary recipes. It's a gorgeous little book, and we are launching it at the Rafa Clubhouse in Soho tonight. Fantastic. So, which should be really fun. So I'm excited about that one. We've also got a book at the end of August, a beautiful book called Macedonia by Katarina Nitsu, which is about the food and culture of Macedonia, which really is, it's like a secret Central European kingdom. You know, I think it's, you know, it's so magical to me. It's got these wonderful photographs. It's kind of moody and mountainous, and there's actually very simple but incredibly tasty food that really reflects the kind of agriculture. They have lots of different, it's so mountainous, there's a lot of different microclimates. So very niche recipes from the different villages. So I'm really excited about that one. It's a lovely looking book. And then in November, we are doing a book called Bad Girl Bakery, which is the baking recipes from the wonderful cafe up in Muir of Ord that, you know, that had a tough lockdown in lots of ways, and then they've just come out fighting. It's amazing, and just the most wonderful recipes. So the start of this year for me was actually spent recipe testing 80 odd baking recipes. They're all very good.
It's a hard life.
I know, you know, there's got to be perks. What can I say?
Well, Emily, I'm quite hungry now. I'm going to have to go and get something to eat. Thank you so much for taking time to have a chat with me.
A pleasure. Really nice to meet you. Thanks, Alistair.
I'm delighted now to be joined by Francesca Barbini, the founder of Lunapress Publishing. Hello, Francesca.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Can you tell us about Lunapress Publishing?
Yes. So I started Lunapress in January 2015. And with Lunapress, I wanted to explore my passion, which is fantasy and science fiction. And so we cover those genre, we cover the genre and all the subgenres as well. And in particular, we have, as well as fiction, we have Accademia Lunare, which is the non-fiction arm of Lunapress. And that means that we follow seminars, proceedings, conference proceedings, monographs, and call for papers. We have one every year, all to do with fantasy and science fiction. So there are a lot of projects, but overall, this is us in a nutshell.
So did you see a kind of gap in the market there? Because I'm thinking that there's not a lot, off the top of my head, not a lot of well-known Scottish science fiction. So did you think there was something that you could help out?
Well, when I started, I must admit, I was really just thinking about what I loved to read.
Yeah.
You see, for a small press, it's quite hard to, if you like, to to do too much. And I'm not here to compete with a traditional publisher either, So fundamentally, it's so much hard work to run a small press by yourself that I thought, at the very least, you have to do something that you're passionate about, because otherwise the various challenges would be overwhelming. And so I started from there, and thanks to that, I then came across some amazing, talented Scottish writers and from all over the world. So that's how we got here.
It's really interesting that idea of passion has run through all of these interviews that we've done. The people who have either, like yourself, started their own publishers, who are now working for other publishers, have got this drive and passion for the stuff that they publish. So when you said the subgenres, could you maybe break that down a bit more? Because people have an idea of science fiction and fantasy, but there's, under those umbrellas, there's a lot going on, isn't there?
There are, absolutely. So obviously there is an entire range, you go from horror, steampunk, solarpunk, cyberpunk, dystopian, and just to mention but a few. And of course, within the subgenre and the main genre, then you have, of course, all the different markets as well. But it is incredible to be able to see not just genre still existing from, I suppose, a few years back, like steampunk, for example, but also the idea of new genre being created because of the current situation. To an extent, science fiction and fantasy, but science fiction, so I suppose, it always allowed people to really explore current events as well as looking at the future, right? So if you take something like solarpunk, which is this idea of looking at a future society where actually there is a certain hope about it, as opposed to a sort of distractiveness that you might find in other type of punks, if you like. And so that allows us really to explore where we are and where we want to be as a society. So just...
And it's an area of fiction, I think, which is getting greater hold in people's imaginations. There is a greater amount, partly through publishers like yourself, getting the books out there, but also I think academically, as you mentioned, that you are working with academics, that's got a greater significance now as well.
Absolutely. I think also one of the things I like to do with Academia Lunare is to create an environment where you can attract different kind of research. So not just your more traditional scholars, but also the fun, the people who love and have a passion for a particular topic, for example. And that creates this sort of cross situation, and that can actually then be the trampoline for more research. And so that to me is fascinating. We've just released our annual call for papers, which is world building in fantasy and science fiction. And and again, you can see that the papers come from PhD student, researcher, or come from in fact the person who has such a passion for a topic that they know it inside out. Yeah. And to me those things are very exciting. Absolutely.
Yeah. So another side of things, what challenges do you face in publishing today?
Well, okay, so the reality is that when you are a small press, of course, like I said before, it's not about competing or about necessarily looking at wanting to be, bigger and bigger. I think that there is an incredible need for excellent small presses, and this is really what I'm trying to work towards every day. Is the idea of being here to facilitate, bringing an author from where they are to realizing their dreams, And, you know, we are here for so many different reasons. So, for example, sometimes, as you can imagine, a smaller project may be something that a traditional publisher cannot take on. And therefore, an author would come to me or to any other small press, you know. But so, for example, and I can say this now because the news is official, you know, we published a writing book by Gareth L. Powell, who's you know, a very important and also up and coming as well, with a lot of new things happening for him, with his About Writing book. And so Gollancz has just acquired the book from me, and to create something even bigger, and it's amazing. So to me, that is such an incredible step, because there is only so much, I suppose, that as a small press you can offer even very established writers like Gareth. And so to me, that is fantastic. And that's why I'm saying, you know, there are issues, of course. Yes, I won't be able necessarily to have my books always stocks in the big stores, but our audience knows us from, you know, from conventions, from online presence, and also it's this ability to be a lot more flexible in what we decide to do. So, for example, at Lunapress, I work a lot with charities, and so we have a special page just for the collaboration we have with charities. And another aspect, for example, is the international approach. I have my favorite page on my website is the Luna family map of the world, which you can see on the website, because our authors are from all over the world, you know, because one of my aim, maybe it's because I'm Italian, right? But it's to be able to bring the fantasy and science fiction coming from all over the world, and not just to direct people to, I suppose, you know, an Anglophone market. And so one of the things we do is to publish a lot of fantasy and science fiction in translation. So this year, for example, we released Greek science fiction, Brazilian science fiction, and those are a lot of different projects that, as I think as a press, I want to try and work on and build to, you know, to make a very exciting environment for small presses, you know, in general, even if I can't do the humongous project with the humongous budget. But I'm sure there are a lot of things that we can do, you know, if I focus on where I am, you know, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It sounds as though you're incredibly busy as it is. With that in mind, could you maybe tell us something about 3 of your current or future titles that you're very much excited about?
Yes, absolutely. So on the 3rd of August, we released this beautiful novel. I'm blurring.
The background is blurring it, but
I am blurring. Okay, so this is Our Undoing by Lorraine Wilson. So this is the debut novel by an incredible author. She is so very talented, and the book is doing really well. And actually, it's a dystopian novel about a future Europe, and is set in the Rila Mountains in Bulgaria. And it follows the story of a conservation biologist. And I'm not going to say too much more, but the book, This Is Our Undoing, is also available in the Edinburgh Book Festival actual physical shop as well. So I'm very excited for this. Another project that got us really excited this year is the Luna Novella series, which is, this is incredible, all this blurring.
If you hold it under your chin, I think you might.
Oh, there you go, that's perfect. So we have this new series. These were the first 6 novellas that came out this year. We got more coming out next year. And again, they come from Scotland, from Uganda, from all over the world, because that's what we like to do.
Yeah.
And I also, these are the book I was talking about before, the Worlds Apart, world building in fantasy and science fiction. So this is one of our annual call for papers, and you can find many more in the Luna store, as well as the Edinburgh Book Festival online store, as well as the physical one. So there is so much. Honestly, we're about to release our 20th title this year, and you know, I wouldn't know where to start, so you better stop me now.
We could go on for some time. Well, maybe we'll talk to you later and or longer. That would be quite nice to do. But in the meantime, thanks, Francesca. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much, Alistair.
I'm delighted to be joined now by Joe Sanders from the Gaelic Books Council. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Alistair.
So first of all, what can you tell us about the work of the Gaelic Books Council?
So yeah, the Gaelic Books Council is a charitable organisation based in Partick in Glasgow. We have the main aim of supporting Gaelic language publishers and writers. And we also work to kind of promote promote Gaelic books nationally and internationally as well. So the main ways we support publishers and writers is through grant funding, but also through events. We run events, and we also work and try and get writers into book festivals, working with book festivals. And we also do marketing, and we sell books online and in our shop in Partick. We also do quite a lot of children's events as well. We've got a project called Levis Shinely Linda, Read and Sing with Linda, that is currently running online at the minute. So starting back in August, we'll have 3 storytelling singing sessions per week, broadcast to a load of schools at once, and it'll be a big group of kids all listening to stories in Gaelic.
And when you say broadcast, is that going to be online or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, so it's done online through the Glow platform, and we work with eSchool, the online education provider based in Outer Hebrides, to deliver that.
So what about the history of the Gaelic Books Council? How long has it been going for?
Yeah, the Gaelic Books Council's got quite an interesting history. It was established in 1968, so it's been going for almost 53 years. It was established at Glasgow University, and the poet and academic Derek Thompson was the first chairperson. Kind of the main reason for the establishment of the Books Council was that there wasn't really much read for pleasure books at the time.
Right.
Although there was a monthly periodical called Gadam, which contained some short stories and poetry. There wasn't really a lot of genre fiction or biographies, non-fiction, that sort of thing. So the aim of the organization was to secure grant funding and help publishers and authors produce these sort of books. So the first book that was published with support from us was called Orhir Cheam, On the Edge of Time by Callan T. McCunnish. And it's a collection of science fiction and fantasy short stories. So that kind of, that shows that from the get-go, the Gaelic Books Council was trying to kind of push the boundaries of Gaelic literature. And that's kind of continued up until the present day. But that kind of pushing the boundaries, but kind of coupled with an eye on the tradition and trying to also publish more traditional Gaelic poetry and stories.
Because I was going to ask you kind of what areas or genres you cover, but I'm guessing you cover whatever there is as long as the Gaelic language is involved. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We don't really specialize in kind of one genre. We support publishers to produce anything from fantasy, crime fiction, historical fiction, graphic novels, a lot of children's books, and some non-fiction as well. So there's a really wide range of stuff.
And you mentioned there that it wasn't just national, but you have an international range. Is that a big market internationally?
We do sell quite a lot of books, surprisingly, around the world. In North America, mainly, we sell quite a lot to there. But we've also sold to Japan, and there's somebody down in Argentina that buys Gaelic books. Yeah, kind of all over Europe. It's really interesting to see the kind of the global interest that Gaelic has, and you know, quite often we'll do events and we'll send out a survey afterwards, and people say that they were they were watching from California or from Nova Scotia in Canada. So yeah, that's really nice.
It is interesting. I find the same thing with Scots Way. Sometimes you look at where people are listening from, and it's quite surprising. But I guess, like any diaspora, people get everywhere around the world. So what challenges do you face in publishing today? Because I think they might be slightly different, perhaps, from other people we've spoken to.
Yeah, it's slightly different. Yeah, I think the kind of main challenge, though, is one that's shared with the English publishing industry as a whole, and I guess that's just trying to encourage people to keep reading in the age of Netflix and social media, video games. All these technologies are just getting better all the time, and in the publishing industry, we have to kind of remind people that books offer kind of a more analog and a more simple, perhaps mindful form of entertainment that make it really worth the effort and sort of give you a break from the frenetic modern world, and then also reading stories in Gaelic. If you're a Gaelic speaker, reading in Gaelic kind of from a Gaelic perspective is it's a really worthwhile thing to do, and just kind of more broadly, I guess the main challenge we face as the Gaelic Books Council is trying to identify where the gaps are in the canon, and we've done market research with focus groups in the Highlands and in the Highlands and Islands, and we've made an effort to kind of listen to people and see what they want to read and what they want to buy, and now we're working with publishers to try and fill some of those gaps.
And are you also doing translation work? Is that something that you're involved in?
Yeah. We do support publishers to bring out translations. For example, we've supported the publication of a lot of the Tintin books and the Asterix books, and a book we've got that's just on the way from the printers now is a translation of Animal Farm by George Orwell. That was done by Angus Peter Campbell, and that coming out from Lewis Press. So that's really interesting. It's the first time Orwell's been translated into Gaelic. So yeah, we focus mainly on original texts, but it's also great to have some of the classics in Gaelic as well.
And talking about new books, do you have 3 perhaps current or future releases that you could tell us about?
Yeah, so there's Animal Farm, Tuanas and Created, which will be hitting the shelves very soon. So keep an eye on our social media for that, and on Lewis Press's social media. A couple more that have come out just recently is this one in Shack of Town. This is a poetry collection by Sandy Nicola Jones, who is the bard of Encomin Gaelic, and she's this is her second collection, and it's a really interesting kind of broad collection. She uses a lot of different poetic forms, and yeah, it's a really great piece of work. And then this is another book called Dewhurst, which means St. Kilda. I should have said Shack of Town means the seventh wave, but Dewhurst, St. Kilda is a crime novel from Ian F. MacLeod, published by Clar earlier this year. And it's an interesting one because it's a kind of a counter history type thing, where the author reimagines a universe where there's still people living on St. Kilda, and a murder has taken place, and it kind of goes from there.
Oh, that sounds excellent. That sounds right up my street, I have to say. Well, Joe, thanks so much for taking time to have a chat with me today. It's been fascinating to hear about the work that you do.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
I'm now joined by Jean Finlay, founder and head of publishing for Scotland Street Press. Hello, Jean.
Hello.
So first of all, can you tell us about Scotland Street Press?
Well, it's a small independent publishing house in Edinburgh, and we publish biography, fiction, and poetry. And we started off with one person, and we're now 5 part-time, and we've grown quite quickly. Well, since 2014.
So that was when you began 2014. What was the kind of inspiration to begin Scotland Street?
Well, I came back to Edinburgh after 20 years away, and the two things were happening in 2014. I mean, the main reason I came back was the referendum, the independence referendum. I didn't want to be locked out of Scotland in any way. If Scotland was going independent, I wanted to be in it. Yeah. And there was a huge amount of energy then, as we all know. And probably that was all part of it. It was in the air. But I came back with a book which was launched at the Edinburgh Book Festival, and it had taken me 10 years to write that book. It was a big literary biography of Charles Scott Moncrieff, who was the translator of Proust and Pirandello and Stendhal. And the book did incredibly well. It had an enormous, I think somebody told me it had more reviews than any other book of that type that year in 2014. Right. And my agent sold the rights to Farrar, Straus and Giraud in New York, which is part of Pan Macmillan. And with that money, I set up Scotland Street Press. And the first book that I published was a collection of Charles Scott Moncrieff's own writings, which were published in the 1920s had originally been published by T.S. Eliot in the Criterion or by G.K. Chesterton in his magazine called The Witness. And that was the first book. So it was founded on the ideas and the literature and the poetry of this man, Charles Scott Moncrieff, in many ways. That was founded. So it had links into Proust and memory and memoir. And the first books we published were memoirs, because it's interesting what you can reach through living memory. That is that outward-looking European attitude. That's what. And right from the beginning in Scotland Street Press, I've had Erasmus interns from Italy, from Slovenia, from Germany, from Holland, and they have really helped me build this company because they're paid for by Erasmus. And as you know, publishing is incredibly expensive. Mm. You know, it costs about £6,500 to bring out one book, and you have to pay people. Mm. Luckily, with these wonderful interns from the Erasmus, and they were all highly trained and qualified people, and they were free, and they helped me build this company. And now we have enough money we actually pay our part-time workers. It's a bit sad. It's very sad we don't get the Erasmus trainees anymore. But
and is that a recent situation with Erasmus stopping, I'm presuming?
Yes, it was stopped. It's completely stopped. I can't get them anymore. You know, it's nobody can. You can't go out there either. I mean, it's appalling that. Yeah. It's a shocking stop in our cultural influences to Europe and from Europe, which are absolutely vital in the education of young people and in our own expansion of our own ideas.
Well, that clearly is one challenge for you publishing today. Can you maybe talk about a few others? What are the challenges you face?
Well, it was a huge challenge during COVID, of course, because we were all stuck in our rooms and having to communicate the way we are doing at the moment, which, as we know, is it's great that we can do it, but it's not like talking to a real living person in the real room. There are lots of things that don't happen. We the ideas that we generate from being alive together in the same room are so much more powerful, I find.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that's the case.
Yes. That's a challenge. And publishing, and of course, I was completely naive when I went into publishing. I was an author. I knew nothing about publishing at all. And I would probably not have gone into it had I known about the financial structure of the publishing world. I mean, since Amazon, Amazon likes to take 60% of your cover price, and the bookshops have followed suit, and then you have to pay your distributor, and they tend to take about 25 to 30. And then you have to pay for everything else as well. You have to pay a typesetter, proofreader, editor, printer, printer's a big one, and you have to do some marketing. And some people have an office. I mean, we do it in a spare bedroom in my house, which is another reason we've survived, because you do it in your spare bedroom, and it gets a bit crowded now with 5 of us in there. But the challenge, and that's why publishing, I realized in the end, small publishers are like small theatres with subsidized arts. That's what we become, subsidized arts. And we don't have to be like that. It's not like that in Europe. I mean, in countries where they have a net book agreement, like in Belgium or Belgium, France, Germany. In Germany, authors can live because they earn a decent amount of money. Authors, publishers, everybody connected to the industry have decent remunerations for their work.
That's interesting. So can you tell us finally about 3 of your current or future publications that you're excited about?
Well, you were the person who gave us the most amazing review for our first piece of fiction, which was called Errant Blood in 2017.
I remember, it's a terrific book,
And he has been, and finally now, this next month, we're bringing out the second in that series. It's bigger and chunkier. It's called The Purified, and that's very exciting. I mean, it's better. It's getting better, and it's the same characters in the same village in the Highlands, and with a bigger and more terrifying terrible thing, something worse than a body has been found beneath the waters of the Great Loch, and it's anyway, that's very exciting. I'm not going to give anything away, but it's beautifully written, beautiful writing about nature, about loyalty, about you compared him to Ian Banks.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. It's also a psychological thriller. It's more of a psychological thriller than a crime novel. I mean, I'm trying to also work out how to categorize the books that we publish. They go into so many categories. We did this wonderful one called Birds and Scots by Hamish MacDonald, and it had the most wonderful illustrations. So we've done a lot of books of poetry which have illustrations as well, and they're doing very well. We've got a US distributor now, and particularly Birds and Scots is doing terribly well in the States. Another book that we're really, really proud of is Alan Darker's Children. I don't know if I sent you that.
No, I don't know that.
No, I must send you that. So in Belarus, we've been publishing. We're the only publisher actually in the whole of the UK who translates from the Belarusian language, because in Belarus you're not allowed to speak Belarusian, you have to speak Russian. And so I decided to translate from the Belarusian language because it's an oppressed language, because there are so many parallels in Scotland about what oppressing a language does to a people. And so this book is in 2 languages, Russian and Belarusian, and we've translated it into Scots and English. Fantastic. And it's Petra Reed, who's a poet who we've published before, who's done the translation into Scots. And it's beautiful translation into Scots. She's worked really closely with the Belarusian translator about all the nuances, the history of the literary Scots and the non-literary and demotic Scots, different types of Scots, which has gone into it through the different characters. And, he's worked with her and how that parallels with the Belarusian. Anyway, that is so good that New Directions in New York, which is a really very good small publishing house, they have just bought the rights to that for the same amount as I got for Chasing Lost Time in 2014. So that's a great triumph. You know, it's about language, it's about translation, it's about communication, it's about here is actually about helping a country which we all know is like the North Korea of Europe, and giving him this voice. He's now escaped and he's in Austria, and he's all right at the moment. But that's and now it's going to go out in the States, and they have a huge reach, New Directions, and the colleges are ordering it and everything. So we're very proud of that.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Jean, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Well, thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
I'm now joined by Peter Burns from Polaris Publishing. Hello, Peter.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Oh, a pleasure. So I'm going to ask you a similar question to that we've been asking all our publishers, is what can you tell us about Polaris Publishing?
So we've been going for 10 years this year now, started in 2011. It was all quite slow burn for a long time. We published our first book in 2012 and then did another one in 2013, and we kind of did one or two a year for about the first 7 years or so, and then we started to ramp it up a little bit more. We were due to do maybe about 20 books last year, and then because of obviously COVID, we shuffled things around, moved some stuff onto this year, and we ended up doing 11 books last year and 27 this year, or will have done by the end of the year. And so it's been quite a shift in the last few years about upping our production.
So how long have you said how long you've been going, but why did you decide to start it? Did you see a kind of gap in the market, or was it just a love of books that got you going? Yeah, so I did the postgrad publishing course at Napier in 2006 or 2005, 2006, and I got a job interning at Berlin Limited in late 2006, and I worked there until full-time until about 3 years ago, and I started Polaris kind of on the side, and they were really supportive throughout that whole process, and they still do all my distribution and marketing and sales and things like that for me, which is absolutely brilliant. So I think we've got a really good relationship there. And so we set up when I was there, a sports imprint called Arena Sport, and we did maybe 5 or 6 titles a year, but there were a few that either I had ideas for or we didn't have the budget to do at Arena, so I took them on and did them with Polaris, and that's kind of how it started, just really as a kind of a side gig. But when that took off properly, there wasn't time to do both jobs, and so I switched over, did some freelance for Berlin, still running their sports list, and then that's recently just ended, and it's now full-time Polaris now. Oh, fantastic to catch at this stage where you're going. And it's interesting you're hearing how you've been supported by Berlin, because I think as hopefully this podcast and the showcase is showing, is that there seems to be real support among publishers and you know, help for each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I've a couple of projects that we've done. I've done co-pubs with Backpage Press through in Glasgow. Initially, when we started out with Polaris, we were doing co-pubs with Arena for some projects. So yeah, I mean, there's a real there's a synergy and a support network across those businesses, which has been brilliant, and it's been a joy working with everybody. So no, it's really good. It's a lovely scene that we're all able to do that for each other. So you've touched on sports, but what other areas do you cover with Polaris? Yeah, so we branched out last year into popular culture a bit more, did some movie books, some music books, and we're pursuing that a bit more next year. We're growing that list. We've done some children's books. I mean, they've been sport related, but the idea is to eventually have our own children's list, and it won't just be confined to doing sport related titles. I mean, I very much kind of fell into the sport. I never planned to be a sports publisher, but that's what I've become. And I've also now written, I think it's 9 books myself.
in the last 10 years. So which I didn't ever expect I would do, which is kind of funny.
That's very interesting that the publisher decides to write themselves, and that wasn't anything that you particularly had an ambition to do. You just kind of saw.
No, I wanted to be a writer, but I always thought I'd be a novelist, and then I somehow ended up, I've become a sports writer, and in many ways it's kind of glorified self-publishing because I'm most of the publisher, but it's working so far. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, that takes us on to the next question, which is, what challenges do you face in publishing today?
I mean, I think the two biggest ones out, in the last 2 years have been the consequence of COVID and more recently Brexit. With COVID, obviously we've gone, a lot more has gone online, and Amazon has been very, for the last 18 months, particularly so. I mean, it's always been good as a main outlet for our books, but it's been obviously especially strong. But then a problem there has been, the warehousing issues that they've had, so that if we deliver books to them and they've got pallets, which I'm sure all the publishers you speak to have had this issue, where pallets are piled up outside Amazon warehouses and not getting checked onto their system. And then we're finding that buy buttons are being taken down because they don't have any stock, but we're looking on our system and we can see that they've got hundreds of copies of our books sitting in pallets outside their warehouses and just not checked in on their system yet. So that's been a real problem over the last, since kind of November through till this summer. And then with Brexit, you're dealing with raw material problems with the printers. And then since 1st of July, the change in selling books into Europe and things like that has been suddenly thrown up all sorts of new issues that we hadn't, anticipated. So those are the two right now that are the biggest issues that we're coming up against.
And neither of those are things you could have foreseen, really. You wouldn't have had a chance to. Yeah.
And especially with Amazon completely out with your control. So you're trying to deal with authors who are upset that their buy button's down, or they're getting notifications that the books will be arriving in 6 weeks, where we're going, no, if you just hang on, they'll be in the next 2 or 3 days. They'll update their systems and roll back on. But it's kind of firefighting where you're completely powerless to do is difficult.
Yeah. Well, on a brighter note, can you tell us about 3 of your current or future books that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I've got on my lovely display behind me, but for anyone listening, we've got The Dream Factory by Ryan Baldy, which is just about to come out, which is an incredible look at football academies, looking at players who make it, those who don't. It's incredibly written, brilliantly researched, and that comes out in 2 weeks. I'm very excited about that one. I mentioned earlier that we partnered with Backpage Press on some titles, and we've now got a relationship with the Athletic Sports website to produce books from their articles that they're producing. So we're doing kind of season reviews of teams that win the Premier League, win the Champions League, if should that happen, and maybe branching out into some other sports and some other books with them. So that's really exciting as a new project that we're doing. And finally, a couple of kind of passion pieces for me, which was This Is Your Everest and Legacy of the Lions, which I co-wrote with Tom English and Gavin Hastings, respectively, which have just come out. This Is Your Everest was about the 1997 Lions tour to South Africa. And that's been selling really well for us, been getting brilliant reviews for it. So that's all very exciting. And similarly, the book I did with Gavin Hastings, Legacy of the Lions, is a look at leadership lessons learned from Lions captains, opposition senior players over the last 35 years or so of touring with the Lions. So that's been a lot of fun writing those. They were kind of lockdown projects, and it's nice to see them out this year and doing really well.
Oh, that's fantastic. These are big and exciting names. And I know that The Athletic has some of the finest sports journalists around now writing for them. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, the quality of their output is absolutely incredible. So yeah, and very, very exciting to be partnering with them.
Well, Peter, thanks very much for taking time to have a chat. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alistair. It's been really fun.
I'm delighted to be joined now by Claire Kane from Fledgling Press. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Alistair. Nice to meet you.
And you. And first of all, can you tell us about Fledgling Press?
Well, Fledgling Press was founded back in the year 2000 by a retired psychologist, Xander Wedderburn. He founded the company when he retired. And initially it was a short run press focusing only on debut authors, and Xander effectively just published what he liked. I came along in 2010, having just finished a degree at Edinburgh University, career change as it were, in English and Scottish literature. And I have taken a manuscript to him that somebody else had actually written and I had formatted for them. We got on very, very well. He liked the manuscript. He took the book, which was a debut. It was a life story. And things just progressed from there. Xander and I got on very, very well. I had no background in publishing whatsoever, but he needed a hand. So I kind of fell into it by accident, as it were. And from there, as I got more and more involved with the company, I actually began working with them, partnership with them in 2011, and took over the company shortly after that, although Xander was still there, sort of guiding me, as it were. And we kind of moved away slightly from debut. We still focus on debut authors, but with the best will in the world, you can't run a business just publishing debut authors only, because you know they have no audience initially. So we've moved sort of into establishing authors and keeping them on our books as well. And now authors approach us to, you know, established authors. So that's good.
That's quite a story, going up with the manuscript and ending up owning the company. That sounds like a story in itself.
Well, I just found the whole industry really interesting, you know, and I mean, books have always been my first love. Initially, before publishing, I was a systems analyst, but I had children, you know, career change after that. So that's how it came about, you know.
So you say that you had focused on debut authors, but so what kind of range of subject matter were you covering, and are you covering now that you've moved on to other things?
It has changed. Initially, Xander focused a lot on life stories and poetry, quite a lot of poetry and historical fiction. When I came along, poetry is not my bag, so at all, and that was quite quickly dropped. Historical fiction, we still do some historical fiction, mainly through Alex Nye. She's a fantastic writer of YA and historical fiction. And we then moved into crime fiction. We had a very successful series, 2013, 14, 15 ebook series of quite trashy commercial crime fiction on ebook mainly. And then life stories we still do. I like life stories with a twist. So we've done one about a transgender lady, Julie Clark, who transitioned on the Isle of Coll, her life story. We've done another one recently, Graham Morgan's Start, which is, Graham's a schizophrenic, but he's very well and highly thought of, works in the mental health arena himself. So we did his life story. YA as well is another big thing that we got into. It was something that Xander didn't do at all. At the time when I started, my children were, two of them were teenagers, and it was something that interested me at that time. And we have again some very good YA authors now as well. So that's our broad sort of focus, really, with some literary fiction as well. Sorry. Other stuff like Kirtland Caccione, who's we published his Happiness is Wasted on Me last year. Now that's a kind of standalone adult book from Kirtland, But if I see something and I think the writing's great, I will, if I can, possibly put it into the schedule, you know, if I think it merits it.
I suppose that's one of the joys of being in charge, is that if something comes across your desk, you think, yeah, I really want to champion this. You can't do it.
That's it. That's it.
It's interesting talking about YA, young adult books, because I think it seems to me anyway, I might be wrong about this, but there's been a real increase in that area, in that sector of publishing.
Yes, and I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that YA is not just read by, in fact, I would say probably proportionally, it's not read by young people. It's older young people, as it were. So anything up to, you know, mid-20s and older, the younger readers who are still adult can engage with YA. So there's quite a broad readership, you know. And I think they tend to be slightly smaller, they're easier to read, you know, more accessible, I think, in many ways. Yeah.
And something else you mentioned, which nobody else I've spoken to has, is choosing to publish as an ebook. How do you come up with the decision to do that?
For a while we focused on ebooks because we discovered, well, the demographics are very different, I think, ebook readers versus print. So we dabbled a bit in, normally I would, well, in the past, if I felt an ebook, a book might not catch a readership in print form, it's very cheap to actually produce an ebook. We have the ability in-house via my husband to do that ourselves. So, you know, if there are books that I feel might not sell a lot in print, then occasionally I'll just bring it out in ebook, see what happens, because it's not a huge cost to us, you know. But I might feel that author still needs a voice, you know.
What other challenges do you face in publishing today?
Well, obviously the pandemic's been really detrimental to us. Last year we had, I think, 8 books planned. We did 3 because we locked down just as our first book was coming out, March 23rd. March 26th was the launch at Blackwell's, that was cancelled. But that book was Whirligig though, which went on to do very, very well. It was longlisted for CWA debut dagger, and shortlisted for the McIlvanney Prize, Bloody Scotland. So that was great for us, but there was so much uncertainty. I mean, sales plummeted. They just fell off a cliff initially because Amazon was too busy supplying toilet paper, I think, to supply books for several weeks, you know. So navigating that has been really difficult. We put 5 books on hold, and then this year had to take a really good look at what was going to be commercial and also attractive enough to a reading audience, you know. So that sales has been our main problem, and also a big part of our business is physical book launches. Yeah, that's a big thing for us. That's gone. So we've had to look at different ways of doing that too, you know. Yeah. Well,
taking that and hopefully looking more positively, can you tell us about 3 of your either current or future titles that you're excited about?
Yeah, that was really difficult for me because I really carefully looked at the books. We've only done 6 this year, and every single one I reckoned was great on its own, you know. I mean, being a small independent publisher, I don't just publish it. I've got to be 100% behind a book before I'll publish it. So, but the gems this year are Too Near the Dead by Helen Grant. It's a horror gothic fiction novel. She's a fantastic author, great, really highly skilled. And the feedback is brilliant. It was in the Guardian yesterday, which was, you know, great for us. Ross Sayers as well. He's a new author to us, obviously. He's been published by Cranachan. The book that we published was his lockdown novel, as it were. And again, I just thought it's speculative fiction, slightly sci-fi, a departure for us. Sci-fi is not my bag, but this was clever enough and near enough the truth that it's believable as a book. So I really rate Ross's book. And up and coming, we have the sequel to Whirligig, which obviously, and Andrew James Gregg, I have high hopes for that book, Crime, that's coming out in October. So they're the three, but the other three books, which were Fake News, short stories by Alex Nye with historical focus, written by Death, and a debut, Crime, by an author called Amanda Mitchison. I really rate these all highly too, you know.
Well, I've bought at least one of those. I'll let you know that for free.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Claire, thanks so much for taking time to have a chat with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me.
So to round this Scottish Publishers Showcase podcast off, I'm joined now by Vikki Reilly from Publishing Scotland. Hello, Vikki.
Hiya.
So first question is simple. What can you tell us about Publishing Scotland and what you do?
Yeah, well, Publishing Scotland's been around for actually a long time now. I think we're in our fourth decade of working, and really we're the trade and networking association for the publishing industry in Scotland. So we have member publishers ranging from the very big, like HarperCollins or DC Thomson, to the very smalls like micro presses like Lunapress, who you spoke to earlier, and 404 Inc. and various others. What we do is we provide networking opportunities, both domestically and internationally, so that they can, build up their visibility in the trade. We do marketing for them. We do catalogues and websites and promotional work for them. Obviously, it's been cut a little bit with COVID, but we usually do conferences, and we usually take a stand at the trade fair and allow our members to come to trade fairs at Bologna and Frankfurt and London. We do lots of training for publishers as well, so they can develop their skills. And we just sort of, we advocate on their behalf and champion what they do, and make sure that we allow them to do the best kind of publishing that they can, and get the word out for Scottish books, Scottish publishers and Scottish authors.
So with that in mind, why do you think events like the Scottish Publishers Showcase are important?
Well, a lot of our publishers, our member publishers, are independent publishers, and a lot of them, they're not the ones that usually get all the publicity and all the promotion that maybe some of the bigger publishers and the London publishers can get. And so we're very much excited to really just shout out loud how successful and how varied and how diverse the publishing scene is up in Scotland. And so we thought, with an event like this Publishing Showcase, I don't think many people are aware just of how much great publishing work goes on in Scotland. I mean, it's to be honest, punters don't really spend that much amount of time paying attention to publishers in the way that the trade does. But I think for people to become more aware of just the work that's coming through in Scotland is a good thing for everybody, because there's just so much to shout about and showcase, which is what we're doing.
I think you're right. I think readers maybe, with a few exceptions, don't really care who's publishing what, but writers often maybe don't know how to find the right publisher. So what kind of advice would you give to someone looking to get their work published?
Well, most publishers will have their own website, and generally publishers will have a submissions page where they'll make it clear that if they do or do not accept unsolicited submissions. An unsolicited submission is a submission that doesn't come from an agent if it just comes from the writer itself. And so if you go onto the Publishing Scotland website, for example, we've got a page where we list all our members that take you through to their websites. So it's a brilliant research tool, our website, to help writers and other people involved in publishing to sort of point them in the right direction for the best kind of publishers to send their submissions to, because every publisher has their own character. Absolutely. And the books that they specialize in, or the kind of books that they do really well. And so it's always useful for writers to know that before they submit to publishers, because they're more likely to get a positive reaction from publishers that, say, if you're a poetry publisher that does publish poetry, or a crime writer. Not every publisher publishes crime fiction, so it's just good to go to the Publishing Scotland website, see your member publishers, look at their website, see what they do, and do all that work beforehand, so that you don't get as many rejections as you don't want.
Well, I think this showcase and this podcast as well have shown the kind of breadth of publishing that there is, and it's that thing, isn't it, about finding the right one for you, and similarly, I suppose, the publishers finding the right authors for them as well. And with that in mind,
readers too, because
readers,
some readers, maybe they're maybe stuck in a rut and they love crime fiction, or they're looking for children's books and they're just not quite sure where to look for. And as I say, if you go to the Publishing Scotland website, you'll find a plethora of publishers: sports publishers, children's publishers, academic publishers, trade publishers, just a whole manner.
And what advice would you give to someone who is thinking of getting involved in publishing? I guess there are, people who think, oh, I've written this book, or a friend of mine's written this book, and I want to help them get out there. What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, again, like the Publishing Scotland website is a good starting point. We do have a section on our website about publishing as well, and we're developing that on our website to talk about the publishing process. And so it's a good place to start to find out a little bit more about how the publishing world works. But then there's also like loads of other resources that you can use. You can, especially if you're new to publishing, I would recommend getting in touch with the Society of Young Publishers. So they normally do lots of good events and training sessions for folk that are wanting a good introduction. Similarly, we do as well. And also just there's a lot of jobs and opportunities on the Publishing Scotland website as well, and that can list internships, and it can list courses and funded opportunities as well. So you can find out things in the jobs and opportunities section as well. And just keep an eye out on, like, Book Twitter is very friendly and helpful, and you can just join the conversation. Most people, if you do join in the conversation and ask questions, they're more than happy to reply and lead you to the next place that you need to know what you want to do.
And that's a good point, actually, that most publishers now will have social media presence, and if you do want to follow them, keep an eye on what they're doing, and maybe see if they're the publisher that you would like to engage with, that's a great way of doing it. I'm aware that we've only really scratched the surface in this podcast and in the showcase about the Scottish publishers that are out there, but it does sound as though maybe the Publishing Scotland website is the best place to find out others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good starting point, because that'll just point you in lots of different directions. As I say, we've just got tons of links to other resources as well. And so it's a good starting point for when you're first dipping your toe into the Scottish publishing scene. And then you'll probably just find, like me, that you just want to dive deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. You can really go down the rabbit hole and find just how many Scottish books and Scottish publishers there are out there that you maybe weren't aware of.
Yeah, I mean, our membership is the highest it's ever been. Even through the pandemic, we were getting lots of new members coming through. And so, despite the challenges of COVID and all sorts of things like Brexit as well, it's not putting off folk from wanting to start out in publishing, which is great to see that optimism and that desire to look for the work that's out there and to bring it to readers all over the world. It's great.
Well, that's really heartening to hear. And I think that's the perfect place to round things off. So Vicky, thanks for taking time to have a chat with me today.
No problem, pleasure, as always.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to this Scottish Publishers Showcase podcast as much as I did recording it. Many thanks to Edinburgh International Book Festival for asking us to take part, and a huge thanks to all our interviewees for taking the time to have a chat. If you enjoyed what you heard, then you might want to check out our other Scots Way Hey podcasts, of which there are over 200, many book related, and you will find them at scotswayhey.com.